Erev Tov, everybody. Welcome to a special shiur tonight on a Tuesday. Although we normally don't give classes on a Tuesday, however, tonight we have a special edition regarding Pesach. Why not? We're only a week and a half away from this amazing, most sacred holiday. Tonight's shiur is dedicated לעילוי נשמת Yosef Amram ben Abraham שלמה, my late brother-in-law Zichrono Livracha. The words of tonight, of Torah that we say tonight, Bi לעילוי nishmato. May He in Shamayim protect all of Klal Yisrael. Amen. Ken yehi ratzon. I want to focus on a topic that I must admit is often asked about and inquired about. A topic that a lot of people don't understand when they hear about it and how it works. Many feel it's fictitious. Many feel that it just doesn't work. And a lot of people stay away from it, as we're going to discuss. This topic of mechirat Hametz, the topic of selling our Hametz prior to Pesach to a non-Jew, a Gentile. I want to go through the history. I want to go through some cases, how it works, and hopefully, again, we can walk out of here with a better understanding that indeed this is a valid practice and should be practiced by all Jews if they want to. So let's just start at the beginning. By midday of the 14th of Nisan, every Jew must have disposed his Hametz in his possession. In the past, Jews would plan their food purchases and their meals so that by the time Pesach would come, they would have finished consuming all the Hametz foods and they wouldn't have to dispose of large quantities. Just now, I was told we need more snacks for school for the children. I said, okay, I'm going to go buy some snacks, but I'm going to buy in small quantities. Pesach's around the corner. I'm not going to go do a big shopping. That's normal to think that. That's the way it was. They would leave only a small amount of Hametz in order to fulfill the mitzvah of bi'ur Hametz, of burning the Hametz in the best possible manner. Burning it. This is what it was. We have a little bit left, and we dispose of it. We eliminate it. However, occasionally, one's plan would backfire, and he would find himself possessing a very large quantity of Hametz when Pesach arrived. In such a case, if he didn't mind losing the Hametz, he could burn it or give it to a non-Jew, a decent non-Jew as a gift. And he didn't want to lose the whole value. What he could have done was sell it, and that's what people did. As long as the time of the prohibition did not go into effect yet, it's permissible to sell the Hametz and receive its full value. The time for the prohibition is the 6th hour of the day. That's a time where we cannot benefit from any Hametz, and on Erev Pesach, and until that time, it's permissible to sell Hametz. Now, this was especially important to food merchants who would remain with large stocks of Hametz before Pesach and had no choice to sell it to a non-Jew in order to avoid a great financial loss. Even if a non-Jew could not be found who was seriously interested in buying all Hametz, in fact, the Chachamim learned from the Gemara that it's permissible for a Jew to tell a Gentile, listen, even though I know you don't need so much Hametz, but buy all of my Hametz for a full price, and if you want, I will buy it back from you after Pesach. According to the Gemara, even saying such a statement is allowed. But this only took place for large merchants, people that sold lots of food and had a lot of Hametz inventory. About 400 years ago, many Jews living in Europe began to support themselves through the production and sale of whiskey. This was because the landowners would often contract Jews to manage their affairs, and it was common for them to lease the distilleries and the inns, the hotels that were housing the people to Jews in exchange for a fixed price or even a percentage of the sales of the whiskey. This whiskey, as we know, is made from barley or wheat, is considered Hametz Gamur. It's pure Hametz. To prevent a huge financial loss, that would come each year by disposing all of this expensive whiskey, it became necessary to sell the Hametz to a Gentile before Pesach and buy it back again immediately thereafter, so that you can continue selling the whiskey as usual after Pesach. Now, the problem was that over time, rabbinical leaders noticed that the sale that was being conducted was often carried out improperly. And it led to very serious problems, because if the sale is not valid, then the Hametz remains in the possession of the Jew. And every hour that passes on Pesach, he violates a biblical command of Bal Yira'eh Bal Yimatzeh, of owning and seeing Hametz. Not only that, there's also a rabbinical commandment that it's forbidden to derive benefit from Hametz after Pesach. Hametz Shavar Lav Pesach. And it needs to be completely destroyed. So therefore, rabbinic authorities used to oversee, or began to oversee, the sale of the Hametz to make sure that the sale was done properly. Now, seeing that the sale was done in an orderly manner, and things were kefi halacha, other Jews, besides the ones that belonged into these whiskey companies and large merchants, other Jews began to participate in the transaction in order to save their own Hametz from being lost. And that's how Mechirat Hametz, as we know it, began to spread and became increasingly common. Now, there are a number of rabbis who claimed that Mechirat Hametz was not really a sale, that it was a fiction, for multiple reasons. Firstly, it's clear that after Pesach, the Hametz was going to return to the Jew. That's reason number one not to believe this is a good sale. Number two, no sales tax is paid to the government on this sale. In every country in the world, there's a sales tax. As far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, but there's no sales tax being done over here. So maybe it's not a valid sale. Thirdly, in a normal sale, the buyer pays for all the Hametz and physically takes it into his possession. But here, the Gentile neither pays full price and he doesn't take the Hametz with him. So maybe this whole sale is fictitious. It's a fiction. It's not right. In fact, there are many Chachamim that held this way. Some say that you shouldn't rely on Mechirat Hametz except in extreme situations to prevent a significant loss. Some say that you can only sell Hametz to a Goy if it's an irrevocable sale. And after Pesach, you cannot buy the Hametz back. One of the great Chachamim who held that Mechirat Hametz is a no-go was the Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon, the Gaon of Vilna, the Gra. He held that no, you can't sell Hametz in such a situation. It can only only to sell it must be irrevocable. Can't buy it back at the end. Then what's the point of selling it? Over time, as we're going to see, several of the concerns that I mentioned that were opposed to selling Hametz became, I guess, irrelevant given the various clauses that we add in the sale document. Nowadays, we sell our Hametz to knowledgeable Gentiles. In the olden days, sometimes the Gentiles didn't even know what was happening, but today, the non-Jews understand very clearly the legal ramifications of the sale. Another allegation that people had was that the Hametz was sold for a symbolic sum, and those opposed the sale claimed that the seller didn't really have full intention to sell. And the answer to this problem was that the Jewish seller agreed to sell his Hametz for a nominal fee in order to save himself from violating the mitzvah of Bal Yira'eh Bal Yimatzeh. Nowadays, our custom is to sell the Hametz for its full value, as we're going to go on to explain, which effectively eliminates this issue. Nevertheless, even though there are big Chachamim that didn't allow it, the vast majority of poskim say that Mechirat Hametz may be relied upon and is valid just like any other sale. Why? Because the non-Jew can refuse to sell the Hametz back to the Jew after Pesach. If the non-Jew says, I want to keep the Hametz, it's his. Done. It's a bona fide sale. It's not a fiction. And in order to prevent even the appearance of a fiction, the rabbis made it a practice to be extremely meticulous about the details of the sale. That we are to make sure that every method of acquisition is used. In halacha, there are multiple ways that a person can acquire an object, and therefore and during the sale of Hametz, for anyone that wants to come, Baruch Haba, you will see that all these methods are used. So that's clear that the sale is effective according to all opinions, and as well according to the government laws too. Regarding payment, a bill of sale is written up to reflect the actual value of Hametz, and the non-Jew pays a deposit. Many merchants nowadays pay a deposit, and the remainder of the sum is charged to him as a debt. But again, that does not prevent the completion of the purchase. After Pesach, the non-Jew decides if he wants to keep the Hametz, he must pay the debt. And if he wants to sell the Hametz back to the Jew repays the cash deposit, and in return for the Hametz, he pardons the debt of the non-Jew from before Pesach. The reason why there's no tax on Mechirat Hametz is because the government understands that this sale is carried out for religious purposes and not commercial purposes, and that's why the tax is waived. So in order to reinforce the sale, that it resembles any other sale in which the buyer takes the purchased item into his possession, what did the rabbis do? As far as you're concerned, you're thinking, but my Hametz remains in my house. The rabbis made it that the Jew sells to the Gentile the ground in which the Hametz rests. And thereby it transfers the Hametz with the ground into the Gentile's possession. It's amazing. There's only one problem with this. Eretz Israel. If you live in Israel, it's forbidden to sell land to a non-Jew. Can't do it. So what do they do in Eretz Israel, where it's forbidden? The area is rented. And therefore that's what they do in order to transfer not just the Hametz, but even the land where the Hametz rests on. And some say that even outside of Eretz Israel, that's what a person should do. The Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in his Teshuvot, Rav Moshe writes that anybody can sell Hametz, even if the seller is a non-observant Jew. He can, write up a document and sell a Hametz b'diavad, right? Obviously, it's best to go through rabbinical middlemen, as what we do nowadays, to know all the laws, but it is possible to do so. So for whom exactly is this mechira intended for today? In recent generations, new storage methods have been introduced that allow us to preserve a lot of food for long periods of time. And that's why food manufacturers and dealers are in large possessions and large inventories of food, and they need to sell their Hametz before Pesach in order not to lose the value of their stock. Not only that, if food manufacturers were to make a point of getting rid of their whole inventory from before Pesach, it would take days or even weeks to restock and market their products. And in the meantime, they would lose business. People would go to competitors. And even if there were no competitors to seize the opportunity, it would cause a great inconvenience to buyers who are unable to purchase the Hametz foods during the week of Pesach, or during the weeks after Pesach, sorry. So what do factory owners and food chains and stores, what do? Simple. Like we said, they sell their Hametz prior to Pesach to a non-Jew, and as soon as Pesach passes, they buy it again and remarket it. In principle, anybody can sell his Hametz to a non-Jew via Mechirat Hametz organized by his local rabbis. Everyone can do so. And he may do so even if he only wishes to sell a small amount of Hametz. I have one box of spaghetti sitting in my pantry, and that's what I want to sell. And you can do so, because once it's been sold, the Jew no longer violates the prohibition relating to Hametz. And that's what we advise everybody to do. We advise everyone to participate in Mechirat Hametz, because sometimes you don't realize that you have Hametz in certain products that may not be Hametz Gamur. For example, there may be some flavored medicines that could pose a problem. They may contain some small amount of hametz, but so we sell them just to be sure, just to get rid of it. We're selling the item. Flavor does pose a problem. Whenever there's something flavorful, then there is something to be worried about. If the item has a chametz in it. So therefore, to avoid all doubt, what we do and we recommend is to sell the item. One of the big questions that comes up is what happens if a person owns shares of a company, or he has money invested directly into a stock that produces hametz. So does he have to sell these shares prior to Pesach? Technically, you're an owner of the company, and that means you own the hametz. So what is it? You own shares. So according to some poskim, you have to indeed sell these shares, because how could it possibly be that you own shares of a company that have hametz? And therefore, in your document to the goy, you have to write that you are selling 50 shares of this company worth $10, and therefore cost $500. There are some that hold that way. However, mipi halacha, according to the letter of the law, if you don't have any decision-making power in the company, then you are considered a creditor, and you're not considered a partner in the company, and therefore you're not required to sell your shares. Now, you want to sell your shares to satisfy all the opinions, that's fine, but again, it's not necessary. Concerning hametz gamur, that's pure hametz, wheat, barley, beer, whiskey, you want to make sure. Some people are strict and say if it's hametz gamur, you only sell if it's a large quantity or a big loss. Big loss. I have, not me personally, but some people have a big stash of whiskey worth tens of thousands of dollars. Hametz gamur, it's a big loss. To dump it down the toilet, who would do that? So therefore, you sell it to a non-Jew. Every person has to make a decision what he wants to sell, what he feels comfortable. If you're able to consume of the hametz before Pesach, or get rid of it some way and it's not going to affect you, that's probably the best way. But again, a lot of people choose to sell the hametz to a goy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Every Jew, before selling the hametz, needs to read the authorization contract that he's going to be signing. It's very important. And I hope people do this. I know we've already sent out our own forms, but I hope people do this, because he needs to understand that he is empowering the rabbi or whoever it is, the middleman, to sell his hametz, and that sale is absolute. However, if for whatever reason he just filled out the form and didn't read that big paragraph, he just relied on the rabbi, the sale is still valid. Because if the Gentile comes during Pesach to take the hametz, and the rabbi tells the Jew that the hametz indeed belongs to the non-Jew, you have to give it to him. The Jew is going to do so. If the rabbi says you go to that address, in that cupboard, in that kitchen, you have to give him the hametz. The seller needs to write his name, his address, clear script on the contract, so that the non-Jew knows who he is and where he lives. In this manner, the non-Jew can now, or will be able, if he wants, to go to the seller's house and take the chametz if he wishes. Best, and some do this, we at Kehila Center do this, is to give the Gentile, the key to a place where the chametz is located, so he can actually enter the place whenever he wants. So you're probably thinking, wait, I don't give my key to my house to the non-Jew. What's the rabbi talking about? So what we do is we give the key to the synagogue. One of the keys to the synagogue we give to the non-Jew, because there is chametz in the synagogue, and that's a symbolic act that here you actually have a key, and you can come and take whatever chametz. The chametz is yours. You paid for it. In practice, though, you don't have to give the key. If you give the person the cell phone number or your phone number, So when the non-Jew wants a Hametz, he can call and come and take it. There's nothing wrong with that. The most important principle is that sellers of Hametz know that after the sale, the Hametz belongs to the non-Jew. And the seller must allow him, if he so wishes, to come and take the Hametz. Ideally, the seller should indicate on the form the various types of Hametz and their prices on this contract that the rabbi gives him to sign. And some people are very meticulous about this. However, in practice, it's very difficult to carry out, to put the exact prices of all the Hametz. You're going to sit there with a calculator, look at all your bills from your supermarket and wonder, plus tax. Okay, it's very difficult to carry out. So therefore, the custom is just to write all the Hametz in one's possession is included in the sale, and the price is a general price that is the accepted market price. And that's what we stipulate over there. That it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, whatever is determined by the appraisers, if they indeed do want to purchase all the Hametz that is there when the holiday is over, to purchase all the Hametz further to what they gave as a deposit. In the contract, we write exactly where the Hametz is located. Upper left cabinet in the kitchen. Room to the right of the bathroom in the basement. This box, as specific as you can get. You can write several places. Again, even if you didn't do so, the sale is still valid. Though all the Hametz should be made sure to be gathered and labeled. This must be done when? Like we mentioned in the beginning, it should be done by the 6th hour of Erev Pesach. This year, obviously it's a special year. We're going to be selling the Hametz just prior to the onset of Shabbat on Friday. So a little bit before the onset of Erev Pesach, we will be getting together to sell the Hametz to the non-Jew. The preferred custom is to sell or to rent the non-Jew the place, like we said, where the Hametz rests, so that the Hametz will be in the possession of the non-Jew, and the sale will be like any other sale in which the buyer is able to transfer possession. A person is allowed to sell Hametz through proxy, and that who writes all the relevant details and signs on the owner's behalf. A person can sell Hametz over the phone, by a fax, via the internet, Google form like we do. Usually the person who's selling the Hametz performs an act of acquisition. We call this a kinyan, in order to empower the rabbis of Shaliach, but the kinyan is not crucial. The most important thing is the transaction between the rabbi and the non-Jew, which is effective for everyone who has appointed the rabbi to sell his Hametz. Sometimes people are worried and they don't know if the rabbi is going to come through, so they fill out 5 different forms. I'm going to sell my Hametz with this rabbi and that rabbi and that rabbi and that rabbi, just to get a thing. We don't recommend doing that. If a person does do that, you should know that the one that is valid was the one that was sold first. The reason why we don't recommend doing that is because it seems deceitful. Unless you're really, really worried that Rabbi A won't sell your Hametz in time, then fine. But we recommend sticking to one rabbi, and if you were to use 2 or 3, the one who sells first is the one that is the sale that is valid. If a person is unable to sell his Hametz due to some honest or unavoidable reason, a person's friend is allowed to sell his Hametz for him even without his permission. Zachin la'adam afilu lo befanav. Our rabbis tell us, since it's beneficial for the owner, a person can act to benefit another person. Zachin la'adam afilu lo befanav, even without his permission, because you're doing it from a big mitzvah. So therefore, this is something that we allow. What about public kitchens that belong to public institutions? So again, the manager or whoever the representative, he is instructed to sell the Hametz. Now, one of the big questions that's asked is Hametz that is absorbed in utensils. I have a Hametz pot. Do I sell the Hametz that is inside the pot? So, we don't do that. we don't sell the chametz that is absorbed in the utensils. Quite a few laws, like I just explained, were introduced in order to make clear that this is an actual sale. If a person starts writing, I am selling the absorbed chametz in my frying pan, then it appears to be lacking seriousness, because the chametz that is absorbed in the frying pan and the pot has no value, and nobody's interested. No non-Jew is interested in buying chametz absorbed in utensils. The same applies to the chametz that are stuck to the utensils. So we don't indicate this in the sale of the contract. Of course, selling the utensils themselves is something that we don't do at all, because then after Pesach you would be required to immerse these kelim in a mikveh. So therefore, that's something that that we don't do. So what do we do if you do indeed have chametz on these utensils, or a little grease of chametz that could be there? Okay, sometimes they're difficult to clean and we can't clean them. So what do I do? I don't want to own chametz. So the truth is, you've nullified this chametz. You've nullified it. You've said you're kal chamira. So any chametz that you have is now nullified. It's less than a kezait in total, less than the 30 grams, and there's not even a need to burn it according to most poskim. So therefore, nothing to worry about over there, especially if you've taken these items and utensils and run them through a dishwasher, and the soap made them pagum. We spoke about this in the last year. The soap then spoiled any remnants of hametz. So you don't have to worry about that. Don't go specifying on your document, I want to sell the chametz that is absorbed or found on the bottom of my pan. That's not something we want to do. All right. One of the big she'elot that come up with regards to selling chametz is what happens if someone is living abroad or is celebrating the holiday in a different country. The sale must take place, we learned, while it's still permitted to benefit from chametz. So that is prior to the 6th hour of the day on Erev Pesach. Once that time passes, no longer is it allowed to derive benefit from the chametz, and therefore you're not allowed to sell it to a goy. Instead, if this time passes, you now have to destroy your chametz. Now, in order to allow people to sell the chametz until the last minute, mechirat chametz, the selling of the chametz to a goy, we do this right before. We want to give everyone the opportunity to do so, and the chametz sells. That doesn't mean, by the way, that the rabbi has to wait to the last minute to make the transaction with the goy. We also stipulate in the process that I'm selling all this chametz that is represented by these papers, and we're also including, we make this stipulation, we're also including faxes or emails or submissions or phone calls that are going to happen within the next hour until 12 o'clock or whenever that last moment is. So the goy is aware of that. The non-Jew's aware that there's still more chametz that could trickle in. Now, the prohibition takes effect according to one's location. In Israel, the 6th hour of the day, which we said that is the prohibited time, is approximately 7 hours before the East Coast here in Toronto, the East Coast Eastern Standard Time. So a Canadian resident who is in Israel must sell his chametz in Israel. Because if he sells his chametz according to the deadline in Canada, then that sale will take place after the onset of the prohibition that's incumbent upon him at that moment living in Israel, or he's in Israel. The end of Pesach also poses a problem for that person, because this person who is now in Israel celebrating the holiday, we're not going to get into this discussion, it's a discussion on its own, but he has to observe 2 Yamim Tovim, 2 Yom Tovs, while everybody else in Israel is one. And which means that the prohibition of Hametz applies to him until the end of the 8th day of Pesach, but in Israel, the Hametz is already bought back from the non-Jew after the 7th day. But it's not a problem for him to sell his Hametz in Israel. But why? How's it not a problem if they're buying it back a day before he's allowed to even partake in it? So the answer is as follows. Even though the Goy sells the Hametz back at the end of 7 days, since this Canadian resident is still observing Pesach according to the custom of the Jews in Chutz La'aretz, living back in Canada, that means he's not interested in buying the Hametz back. I'm not interested in buying the Hametz back. So what is the status of his Hametz? His Hametz remains hefker. Hefker is ownerless. When something is ownerless, it goes into the possession of the Beddin, the rabbinical court. And only after Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galiot, meaning only after the 8th day of Pesach, which is his second Yom Tov of the second Chag, once that passes, the Hametz returns to his possession. If his family remained in Canada, and they plan to eat Hametz after the prohibition started in Israel, then he needs to renounce his ownership of his portion of the Hametz, and his family sells the Hametz over there, assuming that he's in Israel, because otherwise you can't have the best of both worlds. A resident of Israel, what about the other way around? What if you have an Israeli, a resident of Israel, who travels to Canada or the United States? He, in principle, is allowed to sell his Hametz in Canada, because according to most poskim, the obligation to eliminate the Hametz depends, like we said, on the owner's location, not the location of the Hametz. So although he has Hametz in Israel, it all goes according to where he is at that moment. But it is still preferable to sell it in Eretz Yisrael in order to satisfy all the opinions of the poskim, because some say that you must eliminate Hametz according to the location of the Hametz. And if this is the case, since Israel comes first, because they're 7 hours ahead, then that's what we should do. In fact, this is how Rav Moshe Feinstein is posek in his Teshuvot. He says, Lechatchila, we always want to take both opinions into consideration, and whichever time is earlier, that's what we do. And therefore, the Israeli that is coming here should try to sell his Hametz to a Goy there in Israel, because that is first, in order to avoid any she'elot. And of course, an Israeli resident who is visiting North America or anywhere in the diaspora should not eat Hametz on the 8th day of Pesach, just like as he should not do any other activity forbidden on Yom Tov, even in private. I know some people are lenient about this, but really you shouldn't. If such a person has his own place of residence, then he doesn't need to partake in the second Seder or the second Yom Tov. But if he's being hosted by people, then he should participate in the second Seder, and he should not recite any of the brachot on the mitzvot, but instead just answer Amen to the brachot of others. Last but not least, what is the status of Hametz that is sold following the holiday? After Pesach, it's best not to use the Hametz until you know for sure that the rabbi has bought all of it back. When necessary, one could take out some Hametz immediately after Pesach with a willingness to pay the non-Jew if he was to request it. But nevertheless, it is best that Beddin makes an explicit condition, or the rabbis make an explicit condition with the non-Jew, that the Jew will be obligated to pay for any Hametz, any sold Hametz that he takes, if indeed the non-Jew desires. There are those that are strict not to eat any Hametz that was sold, according to the strict poskim that we mentioned at the beginning of the class. So they'll inquire, all that Hametz was sold, I'm not interested, I don't want to eat from it. They hold that the sale is not legitimate, and the Hametz has a status of Hametz Shavar Lav Pesach, which a person cannot eat or derive benefit from. But like we said, you don't have to be concerned about complying with such a stringency. The whole concept of Hametz Shavar Lav Pesach is rabbinic, And whenever there's an uncertainty about a rabbinic law, safek derabanan lekula, the halacha always follows the lenient opinion. All the more true when it's only a small amount of poskim who are strict, and the overwhelming majority of rabbis permit selling chametz to a non-Jew before Pesach. In fact, there were great chachamim who made a point that after Pesach they would go eat chametz that was sold through mechirat chametz in order to demonstrate to everybody that the sale was done in keeping the halacha. With that said, however, it's important that when you're shopping for food after Pesach, you need to make sure that the seller did his due diligence and sold the chametz in keeping with the halacha, so that chametz so a person does not buy chametz shavar alav Pesach. If a person was lax or, God forbid, didn't sell his chametz, it's asur to eat from the food that was from that person until a new stock comes in. Generally, we like to say 30 days until you know for sure that all of his products or grocery is something that was not sitting there over the holiday unsold. But if it's clear that the person did everything he needed to do from the moment of bedikat chametz, and he searched for his chametz, and he annulled his chametz, nullified, eliminated it, sold, and everything is kadin v'kalacha, then it's permissible to buy chametz from this independent merchant as soon as Pesach has ended. So there it is, a little nutshell of how it works, the history of why we do it. We usually like to invite anybody that wants to see the sale to come see it. Again, because of COVID, this year, like last year, we're going to avoid big crowds. But in the future, by all means, feel free to contact myself or your local rabbi. Say, I want to see it. I want to see the way the transaction is done and all the steps involved, because I can guarantee you that there is no more authentic sale fulfilling all the criteria from all the poskim than mechirat chametz, the selling of the chametz to a non-Jew. It is that important. God forbid, if we don't do it the right way, then people can be owning chametz on Pesach, which is a biblical transgression, and we don't want that. Wishing you all a wonderful night, and looking forward to seeing you later on this week for Parshat HaShavua class. Kol Tuv, all the best.